Hello, Denimheads, and welcome to the 38th episode of the Sons of Selvedge Podcast, a podcast where we talk about denim, menswear, and related interests. And today we've got a super special guest. We've got Nick English from Stridewise. So you probably already know him from his YouTube content, Instagram, TikTok, etc. But yeah, I guess to kind of like set the stage, I know, Nick, we've been chatting a bit about connecting when you're in London, and you're telling me about this super cool adventure you're doing around Southeast Asia, particularly around Vietnam, to basically showcase the denim scene you ran into there. So it sounded like a super cool topic. And, you know, I've never been to Vietnam, so I got to watch your video, like a sort of sneak preview, and really dug it. So yeah, I thought it'd be awesome to have you on the podcast and sort of hear a bit about your story. So maybe how did these travels get started? Like, you know, how did you end up going around Southeast Asia?
Yeah, I mean, thank you for having me. I've been trying to get on this podcast since forever, and but I had to have something interesting to talk about first. And fortunately, yeah, I think I've got it right now. The video, I mean, it should be out right now on my YouTube channel, and it's so I spend a lot of time in Southeast Asia, largely because I have a few employees. One of them lives in Vietnam. He's an American guy. I met him when I used to teach in China a long time ago. And he stayed in Asia, right? So he just kind of works with me, and I will I'll go out there and work with him in person like a few times a year. So that's just wound up with me spending a lot of time in Southeast Asia. I also used to live in China and in India. So, you know, I like, neither of those are Southeast Asia, but you get it. I like the place. So that's why I was out there a lot. But also, this Stridewise business thing I've got, it sort of started on boots, and pretty quickly you learn about the Indonesian boot scene, which is very interesting, and somewhere I always really wanted to go. And especially as an Australian, you know, we have a bit of a close relationship with Indonesia than like the US or the UK. So like, you know, you sort of think about Indonesia a lot more, and I was like, oh, that's a great excuse to go there. And I finally had that excuse in like, about a year ago, a little over a year ago. I made it out to Indonesia and visited a bunch of boot brands there in Bandung, where they make some really, really cool boots. And while I was in that space, I encountered the Indonesian raw denim space, because I'm fortunate now. I don't have a gigantic Instagram, but it is at a point where if I'm in a random city somewhere and I post, hey, does anyone want to hang out? Like, I can usually get some guys together. Like, and in Indonesia, it happened really quickly. In Jakarta, I got like a group of like 6 guys, all in their super faded Einhearts and their like, you know, cravat bags and everything else. And at that point, I knew, of course, about the US raw denim scene, and how, whether you're in LA or in New York or Chicago, there's usually like a meetup group. Guys get together, talk about their boots and their jeans, you know, or they don't talk about that, they just wear them. And at that point, because my sister lives in London, I'd met up with a bunch of the guys in London doing it as well. And it's like, that's kind of interesting, because this is very Americana workwear stuff. There's obviously plenty of cultural elements at play that give it a lot of staying power in the US. But of course, jeans are the most popular pant in the whole wide world now, no matter where you are. So it makes sense that, you know, eventually you'll get some guys going, okay, well, if I'm going to wear these, what's the best kind of jeans I can wear? And then they get into the forums and so on and so on. They wind up having these meetups, right? So I'd been to one in London, and I'd been to a few in the US. And then I found myself one in Jakarta, which is a bit more surprising, but it's actually a very solid raw denim scene in Indonesia for a bunch of reasons. It's hard to import, export. So if someone's interested in something, they just make it in Indonesia. So there's a ton of shuttle looms there, a ton of brands that are really under the radar because they're not very online. And anyway, I'm talking about Indonesia now. But anyway, Southeast Asia and denim, it's a thing. And in Vietnam, because my colleague Carl, Carl is his name with the American accent. I lose a lot of people.
Carl.
Talking about Carl, because after him I hired a guy called Kyle, and that just everything went to pot. Anyway, Carl's been there for like 10 years, and so when he started working for me, he was already kind of interested in this stuff and aware of the Vietnam raw denim scene, right? So he wrote an article for me many years ago before he worked for me, which was like just interviewing some, you know, denim heads in Vietnam, and that kind of planted the seed. Heddles shared it. I think it's the only time Heddles has ever talked about me, which was nice. And then that was like, I should eventually I should go take a closer look at the Vietnamese scene. And then lo and behold, I found myself in a position where I was spending a good 3 months a year in Ho Chi Minh City, right? So yeah, we linked up with them, and yeah, made this really cool video. It's been in post-production for like a year, just getting the translations right, and then color correcting, and audio is weird, and yeah. Anyway, everything that could go wrong went wrong, but it's finally out, I think, and it's not gonna get the same views as like the video I filmed right before it, which is like best winter jackets that I just spent 10 minutes filming, and that's going to get more views because that's what people search for. But it's okay. I do the best whatever list videos that helps me fund the more enjoyable little anthropology journeys into the heritage and raw denim scene wherever I find myself.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've seen a lot of your content, like your guides and like recommendations, and I actually thought this was like super cool as a concept because like as someone who's never traveled Vietnam but has always wanted to, jumping like right into what that scene is like without having to travel there was super interesting. And it's like, anyone can write a review about a product and like that review can stand, but something different to like go to a place, meet people. Like I know some of the guys you interviewed didn't speak English, but you're able to still like basically run an interview with them, have a super interesting conversation and even get into like some of the societal nuances as to like why raw denim was cool to them. And like how it fit into their personal lifestyle, which I'm going to go into in more detail. But like those kind of nuggets, I think, are what make the content super interesting. And maybe just jumping to one of my other questions I was going to ask is like this kind of like denim scene guide is super cool because it's like crossing over between culture and society and different parts of the world, and also this hobby. I was going to ask, are you going to do more of these kind of videos where like you're going to other places? Like I know you went to like in your other video, you went to Agra, you went to was it like to Chennai, and like all these different other places around Asia. Are you going to kind of like do more of those kinds of content?
Well, the thing with the raw denim content is I do it because it's very interesting to me. It doesn't really make me any money, which is okay. I like it, and it goes hand in hand with the boot stuff. My point being that unlike a lot of guys out there, this is like my full-time thing, right? I've even got like 3 employees now because I got a website that most people don't even know about, but that helps me, be able to do this full-time, right? So I can't focus on the denim stuff quite as much as I'd like to, but fortunately I had this hookup in Vietnam, and it's also not everywhere, right? Like there's a little bit of a burgeoning scene in India, but the new brands there, Blackbird and Craft and Glory in particular, they're sort of trying to more create an Indian love of heritage wear and boots than like a need that's there right now. So and I get some people talking to me here and there online from India, but and I'll probably be going there again in the next year or two. So I'll see if I can hunt them down. I'll have a look, but it's not as like readily apparent there. And it might just not be as online because, as I've found in a lot of these places, like in Bandung, Indonesia, some of the best boots in the world, most of them don't have websites. Like that's just, there's just not that meeting point yet in a lot of these places. And that doesn't stop them being successful. But, if I get back to Indonesia, which I probably will, I might try and do one with the Jakarta guys there. I'm also aware though that Singapore and Malaysia have their own thing kind of going. And I will actually be in Malaysia in a couple of months. Maybe I should try and set something up. If there are any Malaysian denim heads listening to this, do reach out, and I'd like to hang out with them. There's a whole like Southeast Asian denim thing that's very interesting to me because I think most guys, when you first get into this, you hear the lie that Japan has all the shuttle looms. They bought them all up, and that's where all the selvage denim comes from. Then eventually you start hearing about American and Italian selvage. But a lot of people I don't think know that there's a lot of them in Indonesia, and even in like Vietnam and Malaysia. I know a guy in Malaysia who's like he's been charged by the government. He's got this deal with real estate deal with the government to help build up Kuala Lumpur and get more international attention. They were basically like, hey, how come Hong Kong and Dubai and every other Asian megacity is like talked about so much and KL isn't, but we speak English? This doesn't make any sense. So they're really in a big like cultural revival thing to try and make it more of a hotspot. And this guy, I met him through the business. He's a friend of mine, and he's getting shuttle looms in, like he's trying to get like Malaysians making selvage denim with traditional dyeing techniques, that sort of stuff.
That's cool.
So there is a lot to talk about with that. So I'll definitely be doing some stuff in Malaysia, and I guess I'll jump over to Singapore as well, because they've got a lot of money in Singapore. There's a brand in Brunei they talk to me a lot on Instagram, and they're not quite there yet, but he said he will. There's like one brand in the Philippines. Like there's often like one, but it'd be hard to justify. I'm going to take an international flight and get a cameraman and do the whole production thing. Like it's very hard to justify the bottom line with any of that. But I often just find myself in places, and then I'm like, I'll just find a local guy and see what I can come up with. But anyway, that's a long-winded answer to your question, which is that I know there's a scene in Thailand and quite a few shuttle looms there as well. And I know there's one in Jakarta that I can get into, and Malaysia. So yeah, I could say, let's say over the next year or two, I can promise probably 3 videos on that. I mean, we'll see how this Vietnamese one goes. One thing is like raw denim, it's just not that popular online relative to boot stuff and other stuff that I do. But the good thing is that these countries tend to have very high populations, right? So that kind of can help to balance it out. Like these Indian videos I did, they all got 250,000 views, and so did the Indonesia one, and that's just because so many people there and they find it cool to see themselves on the channel.
Yeah. So one thing that was kind of interesting is, like, I know you mentioned that like denim videos don't get as many clicks as say like a boots video. I had a few interesting conversations with folks like Jake at Almost Vintage Style of like, what's folks' ingress point to the hobby and like where do they go next? So like for me, it started with denim, but next thing you know, I'm like collecting boots, and then like the kind of third step.
Yeah, it's one or the other usually. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think like third is either watches or leather jackets, right? So they're almost like the kind of like the 4 key things to
leather jackets. Yeah. I hadn't thought about the crossover with watches. That's an interesting one. Yeah, I'm always struck with watches because watch guys, they'll drift over to this space. I mean, oftentimes a big watch guy will also be a big denim guy and a big boot guy, because there's this thing where guys just tend to really like to read up about how everything's made, the stuff that they wear, that they buy. They do a lot of research. Women don't do that quite so much. It's kind of interesting. Like they'll be interested in how something looks and some other elements of it. But the thing where like a guy will be like, oh, I'm thinking about getting this pair of boots. I'm going to read 2,000 word long review about how the leather's tanned and, if the stitching is waxed and that kind of stuff. Like that's just like a guy thing. We get really into it like that. And to my point, I don't know if this is problematic to say, but you know how guys tend to lean more in like the STEM direction, overall. I don't, but guys tend to. And that's like why I think it's pretty clear that's why watches they're so acceptable for guys to really geek out about watches in the same way it is about cars and gadgets. Like it's like that techie, this is very finely engineered and that kind of stuff. And what's kind of interesting with boots and denim, and maybe a little bit more so for boots, is that you can come at it from that, I don't know if it's right or left brain. I know that it's all bunk anyway, but like you can come at it from the STEM direction. Guys get really into like the engineering and the load dispersal and, how these materials are going to react over time and la, 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 la. Or you can come at it from like point of like, the liberal arts sort of style. Like, oh, those are really pretty boots. I love the way they look. Yeah. But which is kind of where I come at from it. Like, I just don't have a STEM brain. And so sometimes like I'll be getting into something and like into like a product or an area, and I'll just notice my brain like just like, okay, this has gotten too mathematical. I'm not into it anymore. And that's how I am with watches, right? Like I just found a brand that I like and I like the way it looks, and it's like, it's fine. Like I get quartz watches, which I know is heresy, but I'm like, yeah, but it's cheaper and it doesn't break as easily.
I got a really cool a Timex recently that's quartz, but it's got like solar built into the panel, and it looks like it's like an expedition style watch. Like you would never know it's not like battery or I don't know what the right terminology is, but like it's basically solar powered, but you would never know by looking at it.
Yeah. I have a solar quartz watch myself. That's like, I found that to be like my sweet spot for it, because it's like solar. It's cooler than quartz. You get some coolness points and sustainability points. I've got to watch 6 hours of sunlight is 6 months of battery power. That's great. Eventually it'll just turn to mush. It won't work for the rest of your life, but it's still like, that's like the midway point where like, I can't be bothered. I just don't care that much about automatic watches. But solar quartz is a little bit cooler than just regular quartz. And also something that I found hear guys say a lot, and it's funny, is like for some guys, the reason why they like going out of the house, like with their watch and their boots and their like tough jacket, but especially their watch and their boots, is that like, if no matter what happens today, if I find myself like stranded on a desert island or whatever, the watch is windable, it'll go forever, and the boots will keep me going practically forever as well. I hear guys say that, and a lot of them are ex-military, to be fair, but for other guys, it's just like that idea of like, I just want what I've got on me to be able to put up with whatever happens. It's a preparedness, right? Like it's just a thing that a lot of guys like gravitate toward, and that could also potentially explain part of the gender divide too, right?
It's a very American thing, I think, because like being from the States, but having lived in France and in England, I feel like that's something I would hear an American say, but I'm not sure I would hear. I mean, I don't know about
in case I need to conquer the elements. Yeah, I guess it's a pretty American thing. I mean, I guess the Brits are the one that did all the colonizing, but still, yeah, it's that is pretty American. Like, well, what if I have to Davy Crockett today? Like, I might just have to Davy Crockett today.
Yeah. Yeah, like I was hanging out with some friends recently. They're like talking about like outdoor and camping stuff, and like someone's like, "Oh, what kind of hatchet do you have, David?" I was like, "I actually don't own a hatchet." They're like, "Really? You kind of own one of everything?" And then I was like, "Shit." Next thing I know, I'm like impulse buying a hatchet online.
I know. Another thing that has a lot of crossover with the space is guys that like knives.
Yeah. Yeah.
And as an Australian, where we don't really do guns, and just a general like we have to arm ourselves thing. Not so much of a thing, but the more if you're a guy who camps or whatever, then like sometimes you just need a knife for whatever, to cut a tree branch or to cut a shoelace that's like trapped in the railroad and the train's coming down to kill you and all that kind of stuff. It's that preparedness thing. But yeah, you hear Americans often talk like fondly about the days where like, you just leave the house with like your boots and a knife. Boots used to have the little knife pocket on it, and like then just your boots, your knife, and a watch, and then it's like whatever comes your way, you can handle it. And I thought that was interesting because I always thought like knives. Oh, these Americans always talking about weapons. They're crazy, but like it actually ties into the boots and the watch, and it's like I want to be ready for whatever.
Yeah, for me it's interesting.
And I'm also like, well, I was just saying I used, before I did this, I worked in the fitness industry for like 10 years, and it's like you'll find guys saying similar things. Just like, I mean, even like the CrossFit space, functional fitness, is generally called GPP, general physical preparedness. Like it's not about like bodybuilding, it's not about powerlifting, it's about like just like we're going to train all these areas of fitness, explosiveness and accuracy and coordination and balance, and just so like just whatever happens, you're a little bit more likely to survive it. Guys like that, they're just like being able to better survive apocalypse.
It's an interesting parallel, I think, because like I do a bit of CrossFit just for like trying to kind of stay in shape as I'm in my 40s and stuff. But when I got introduced to like kettlebells and like kettlebell flow, that just like really, really resonated with me. It's like, man, this is so cool. It's like all the kind of fancy shit you would normally do with machines in the gym, like stripped down to just like 2 chunks of iron. And like I love just doing like kettlebell stuff. And Andy on the podcast, he's the same way. And I wonder if there's something kind of similar where it's like you could have fancy high fashion, or you could just distill it down to like one great pair of boots, like I'll say a Red Wing 8111, and like one great pair of raw denim jeans, and you're like kind of simplifying these complex spaces into something real simple.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we always get asked like if you could have one pair of boots or one pair of jeans or one piece of workout equipment, like I would rather have a whole gym, but if I had to pick one thing, I'd like give me a few kettlebells and I can figure it out. I can make it happen.
Yeah, one thing that I wanted to kind of quickly make sure I didn't miss and come back to. So you're talking about like geeking out and kind of like wanting to like the male mind and wanting to jump in and kind of understand these systems, understand how things work. I was really blown away in your Vietnam video by the fella who had, I think, a pair of like Iron Rangers or something and had worn through the sole. And he's like, you know what, screw it. I'm going to learn how to like hand last a boot, and completely rebuild his own boots with like storm welts and everything. Like, what's the story with that guy? That was amazing.
Oh, in fairness, that guy, he's a shoemaker. Like I think he had the ability and the power to do that before he got those boots.
Okay.
I've also got a video coming out from him with him. So I followed him. His name is Trung, and his brand is Akito Boots. and they're on Instagram. And it might be the only hand welter in Vietnam. It's possible there's one or two other ones, but like, you know, let's just say he's the only hand welter. That sounds better. So he just loves his Americana boots and stuff. I guess I can't assume how much this denim audience is familiar with different types of boot construction. But yeah, you know, hand welting is like, we invented the machine in the 1860s to make it so you don't have to hand weld anymore because it takes forever. But there are still some people around the world. You could liken it to people insisting, I just want selvage denim. I don't care about projectile loom denim being faster or even if it's better. Like I just like stuff the old-fashioned way for a lot of reasons like that. There are other reasons to like hand welting, but I'm getting off course. A hand welter is a very special thing. Oftentimes you find it in places where they just can't afford Goodyear welt machines. But there are Goodyear welt machines in Vietnam, and that guy Trung, he hand welds. So we went to his storefront, and then we went to his workshop, and he has like a master who taught him these techniques and everything. And yeah, it's really cool. And obviously there's always crossover between boot guys and denim guys. But yeah, that video is also going to be good and should be out, I don't know, in the next couple of weeks. I had to get a new editor. This one speaks Vietnamese, so I'm hoping it'll be not too long till it comes out.
That's cool. Yeah, one thing I quite liked about that video as well was like kind of seeing the progression of like, okay, I've gotten into boots. You know, I've got some Red Wings, maybe they're most likely Iron Rangers or like classic mock toes. But then all those guys kind of found their way to engineers and like Wesco, Mr. Lou, and
they just all like Wesco. Like, I mean, obviously they're all like friends, so I guess it makes sense that they would just all kind of have those conversations. So I guess we can't just say independently that's where everyone will eventually wind up if they're Vietnamese denim heads. But yeah, that was pretty funny. They all had Wesco engineered boots. And also a lot of it is that one thing we haven't mentioned yet is that when I was asking them, I was like, you know, it's pretty hot and sticky here in Vietnam. Like, this is all really thick denim you guys are getting into. The first question people are going to ask is like, why aren't you just in shorts and tank tops all day? And the main answer, besides like it protects them from the sun because they don't like to get too much sun, it's that it protects us because like something like 90% of people get around on scooters and motorbikes. So like that element of like this thick denim protects you if you have like a minor accident. That's very appealing to them. And while they're doing all that, they get unbelievable patina because they're just like sweating and destroying their jeans all day, every day.
Yeah, I mean, like I grew up in Austin, Texas, right? And like, you know, it's not quite Vietnam, but it's like still pretty hot and humid. And I'm guessing, because what part of Australia are you from?
I am from the subtropical region of Brisbane. Yeah, pretty hot.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So it's like, you know, we would never wear this kind of stuff growing up, right? But then I was back home like a summer or two ago, and I just got a pair of John Lofgren M43s and like the olive shinky leather. So I was like super, super stoked. I was
Yeah, you did your homework. All right.
Oh yeah, they're great. And I was like, I gotta wear these like right away. And I was going shopping with my sister and her family. So I'm like, you know what? Screw it, man. I'm just wearing like t-shirt and shorts and like boots. It's like everyone probably looked at me like I was an idiot, but like I didn't care. I was like, my head, I look cool, so like it's all right. Like I'm wearing my boots and it's in the middle of summer.
The shorts and boots thing is just a funny conversation. I recently kind of allowed myself to start wearing Red Wing mock toes with shorts now and then if I was in a really I don't care kind of mood. Any other boots though, I don't know if I could do that. But it's funny, like in like Australia just doesn't have boots. They got Chelsea boots. They've got that one kind of boot. But if you turn up in Australia in like a pair of mock toe boot, like they won't know it. You can hand it to them and they won't be able to understand what they're holding in their hands. You know what I mean? So, but yeah, out there it's like it's Aaron Williams or maybe Blundstone. Even if you there's a Wikipedia page for Australian work boot and it's Chelsea. Like for whatever reason, when we found out you didn't have to mess with laces, we were like, that's it, that's our boot. And that's just kind of what everyone wears down there. So people always tell me like, why am I wearing Chelseas with shorts like a good Australian? And I'm like, no, can't do that.
Yeah, I guess England was kind of like that too, right? Because like with all the Northampton makers, they're not really making like work boots. I mean, even like Trickers, who's probably the roughest and toughest, I guess, of all the Northampton makers, they're still not really a work boot. It's like a dress boot that's just really overbuilt, you know?
Yeah, you know, actually, I'm about to publish a video on. I went to Trickers' store and did a whole thing with them there. I've also been to their factory and did a video there. But on my last trip to London, because again, my sister lives there, so I go there a fair amount, and I'll see if I can do a bit of work sometimes. yeah, we had that exact conversation. I was like, I went to the Tricker store, did the whole thing, and I was like, it's interesting looking at this area because that is kind of like the rough and tumble British boot brand, and yeah, there's that obvious sort of contrast with in America. If you're getting some really nice, really durable, resolable boots, they're going to be inspired by Pacific Northwest work boot, like by loggers or by Midwestern iron miners or whatever, something like that. And in Britain, they're country brogue boots, which doesn't mean that they're that much wussier or anything. It's just like this is what the guy at Trickers was telling me, Neil. He was like, yeah, I mean, it's a similar origin story for our stuff, but like it's from like farming, in America, like so much of it is like building the country, whereas that's we didn't. The country's kind of already here. They obviously still build things, but you understand. So their boot pedigree sort of stems more from farms and trudging through marshes. The people who work on and own farms, also hunting. So the brogue boot, as you probably know, that was originally like an outdoor boot because the broguing holes help to drain water and that whole thing. So that's more the DNA of their boots. And I guess it's a lot of it is because Americans were building America, and that wasn't quite so much the case in England when it was time to invent welted boots. But there's also other interesting parallels, like Chelsea boots. You very rarely see Chelsea boots from like a real American work boot brand, like Goodyear welted. Nick's came out with one, and it's just kind of weird looking, and like White's and Sherman and Westco, these sorts of brands just don't come out with them. And even Red Wing, I feel like they've struggled a bit to come out with like a Chelsea that really resonates. And I think part of that is that like, unlike toe boots, Iron Rangers, logger boots, that kind of stuff, the Chelsea's origins aren't in work boots. Like the Chelsea boots origins were as a walking shoe for Queen Victoria, just to be easy to put on, right?
Interesting. I always assumed they were like equestrian or something.
That was you can see like pictures of them. They look like kind of like sort of like a clown shoe with a small toe. Anyway, it's all very well established. And then it just kind of grew from there. But the Chelsea boots origins, it sort of like more became a work boot later on. And it more went from being a walking shoe for the upper class to, eventually it got into equestrian circles. And it was called the Beetle boot for a long time because they wore it with suits. Like that's sort of the direction it's taken, and kind of became more work booty later on. But anyway, country brogue boots and Chelsea's, those are pretty British, and the other stuff is pretty American for a whole host of interesting reasons.
One thing too, I was also quite surprised by, because I love all the P&W stuff, and like I recently got a pair of whites, which I've wanted for like a pair. I've wanted to get into them for like probably 10 years, and so I finally did. But I was quite surprised to see that like in the UK they just don't build houses with wood. Like everything's like breeze blocks or cinder blocks and then brick on the outside of it. So I was like, oh, right. So you guys don't really even have like a logging industry. And they're like, well, no, there's no forest really. And I was like, oh, I never really thought about that. So I guess it's so much geographic centric, right?
Yeah, true.
Maybe kind of going back to your video again as well. I was quite interested to see the fact that there are these particular motives as to like why denim for these guys, right? And like as people who've both grown up in hot climates, it's like I would not have initially thought of these as motives, but they actually proved pretty logical once I kind of heard the guys talk about it. So one's like protecting from the sunburn or from sun exposure, or like not falling off your motorbike, like and some of it also I was a little bit skeptical about, like the ocean washing and kind of like their maintenance mindset, but just the general philosophy of like we're using denim for these specific reasons was like quite cool to see. Like what was your take on those kind of like reasons, their rationale behind why they're wearing this stuff?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good reminder of the origins of denim, right? I mean, denim jeans they're relatively new as far as apparel goes, right? It was only late 19th century that they got invented, patented in the first place. And it's no news to anyone listening to this of what they started out as. It was because it was really thick and durable. Well, it wasn't that thick back then, but it was very durable and abrasion resistant and all the rest of it. And then it just got that popular kind of after World War II. Not to get too into the history of the jean, but one thing led to another. And now it's just, you go outside, you're in the subway, you look around, 80% of people are wearing jeans. They're just they're just everywhere, and they're not being used for very hard wear. And obviously, I don't have a problem with that. I don't have any problem with someone wearing boots or jeans, even if they're not, bricklaying in them or whatever. But yeah, that's an interesting part of the video that also shouldn't be interesting at all, and probably won't be for a lot of people. But it's like, hey, why do you guys wear such like thick, sturdy denim even though it's hot? And they're like, because it's tough and protective. And it's like, oh yeah, that is why it was invented. That's true. This shouldn't be so surprising.
Yeah, it was just like that plus hot climate is like that particular combination, which I was like, man, it's so strange.
I know, and also like honestly, down there, out there, I should say, just because that's the temperature kind of year round. There's a lot of places like just shorts aren't so much of a thing. Now, Vietnam is very different to, say, neighboring Thailand, as far as like how likely a guy is going to be like wearing shorts and a tank top. It's not that different actually to Thailand. What's really different in India? India, like you don't wear shorts, doesn't matter how hot it is. Same with Sri Lanka. Like it's just culturally another thing that guys are really supposed to do. So you almost would expect it to be more of a thing in India, but there's other factors at play here. But yeah, anyway, it's like, because it's just kind of warm and hot all the time. One, they just don't really feel it quite so much, of course. And two, it's like, well, so what am I just never gonna be wear anything that has long sleeves or long legs because of the weather? Like it just becomes more of a background thing, the heat, than it is for us, because we're big babies and we have seasons where we live. What I found interesting part of the video, the discussion as well, is that Vietnam is unique in this conversation, because of the history of the war and stuff, and how jeans are so American, and how they weren't really a thing in Vietnam before the war, right? So it's like all over the world, jeans have become more common than they were 100 years ago, and it's always, in a lot of places, it's had a very interesting journey, like the tale of how people would smuggle jeans into the USSR as a form of rebellion against the anti-American government, that sort of stuff. Like jeans take on this sociological character that differs a lot based on different places. But yeah, I asked too, the guy who runs Copper Denim, because he, of everyone else there, he was one who actually had a Selvedge denim store. Yeah. And yeah, that was part of the conversation. That was like, this product is so American, and that's often like why it's cool, and whether any kind of barriers to like starting a denim brand. It's such American apparel, because it's not just denim. They get into the workwear stuff. They get into their chore coats and their wabash and military surplus stuff as well. Like they all love their fatigues, like everything else that comes in the space. But that stuff has more cultural baggage. It's more loaded in Vietnam. So that was one of my questions. I was like, have you found more barriers here than you would have if you just had it in another country? And he was just like, nah, the war's over. It's fine.
Yeah, there was a quote where the guy said like, America always leaves something behind. And that really kind of like, I like paused the video when I was watching it, because I was like, man, that's super interesting. Because like I read Amatora and like have heard the story about like why Japan's into denim and stuff after World War II. But I was like, wow, it's so weird to see like almost the exact same thing play out in another country at a different point in time. And it's this really interesting thing that like there's this notion of like the U.S. goes to a place, they ruin it, and then do horrible atrocities. But somehow like the clothing persists after that. It's just such a strange concept to me as someone who grew up here. I still can't quite wrap my head around it, but it's just like, man, this happened in Japan and it happened in Vietnam at different points. This is really strange.
Yeah. I sort of don't want to like act like Vietnam is an especially concentrated hotbed of raw denim activity, Sure. Like, cause I probably could have found more people in Jakarta to talk about it, but that's kind of where I just happened to be able to film it and stuff. But I mean, so much of this is like the boring answer of, after World War II, Americans just ran global media. That's where the movies were coming out of. That's where all the kids with the blonde hair and the motorbikes are having fun in their jeans, and they just became a symbol of freedom. Most developing countries, at least in the late 20th century, were in dictatorships in one form or another, totalitarian governments, I should probably say. And so yeah, jeans became this this is symbol of freedom. You know what I mean? So I think even in Vietnam and Japan, who have good reasons to want to avoid all American stuff, number one, if you tell people they can't like something, they're going to like it even more. But number two, it's just like, that's just where the movies were coming from, man. That's just it. Like, I think that's a lot of it. There is more interesting stuff to it than that, but I feel like that's responsible for a lot of it.
Yes, it is interesting because I know you mentioned like earlier in the chat about like some dudes are, you know, putting on their kit because they want to like be ready for the apocalypse, right? And you know, they've got their pocket knife, they've got their Leatherman, whatever. And I was like, well, why do I like to wear this stuff? And I mean, obviously the main thing's patina. I just love seeing how things change over time. But a big part of it was just kind of like, I just feel like I look cool when I'm wearing it. Like if I've got my engineers and my leather jacket and like some cool sunglasses, it's like, I feel cooler than I do on a day where I'm not wearing that stuff.
You're cooler than you are.
Not saying I am cool, but it's relative. And I'm like, maybe it's that simple, right? You know, no matter where you go, people want to look cool, and this is just like one way in which one can look cool.
Yeah, I mean, there are 1,000 ways to come at it, right? I mean, one thing, our mutual friend, Jake at Almost Venture Style, he's very different to his motivations are quite different to mine, and it also changes. Like for him, he's like, if I'm gonna wear something, I want it to be the best version of that, you know, like for my self-respect or something, I guess, right? Like, you know, I totally get that. I kind of got into denim and boots because I didn't want to have to think that much about what I wear. I wanted to just be like, I didn't want to look at photos of myself in 20 years and think it looked really dated. I was like, what's just like the most boring, you know, classic, you know, which I feel like a lot of guys start out there, personally. Or you can be a Vietnamese denim head who's just like, I need something to protect me if I fall off my motorbike. You know, like there's a million and one reasons for it. I do have to say though that like when I started getting into raw denim, it wasn't until I got my first pair of like pretty heavy jeans, you know, like they're like 17, maybe 18 ounce, the Pure Blue Japans. That was when it was like, oh, like I just feel like I've got a bit of a layer of armor around me when I walk around, you know, like it's just feel a bit more like I'm ready to be outside, especially in New York again, where it's like, yeah, you don't want your clothes to be flimsy. You don't feel like, all right, I can make it.
Yep. Yes, maybe kind of shifting gears a bit, like what do we got to look forward to this year with Stridewise? I know you mentioned, you know, kind of growing your project, like bringing on team members, et cetera. Like what do you got coming this year that's that folks should be looking out for?
Oh boy. I mean, as far as videos go, I have like 40 or something that haven't been posted yet. I got a visit to Bledish Chauffe, the French bag company. I went to their place in France and did some stuff with them. I have a little more India stuff to do, but honestly, the main thing that I'm focusing on, I mean, besides like I'm just doing a lot of loafers and leather jacket stuff. So like that's, as far as content goes, yeah, I've done a lot of boot stuff, and if I can get like some good Google traffic for loafers, like that would help me from losing all my money in summer when people stop buying boots. So that would be, and I also really like loafers. But bigger picture stuff is, yeah, we're trying to come up with some products and stuff, you know. So, you know, I've been doing this like, I don't know, 6 years or something, and just meeting a lot of people and networking a lot, meeting a lot of connections, doing lots of favors. And at the moment, there's 2 projects where yeah, I think I can actually come up with some products that are pretty cool and unseen before, you know. So one of them is I can say this because I don't think anyone can steal this. It's feral swine leather, wild boar.
Yep.
I did a collaboration boot a few months ago with Caswell Boots, and the leather was my idea, but the leather took like 2 years to develop because feral pig leather is not, it's very good once you have it, but it's always blotchy, and that's one of the reasons. But that's probably the main reason why it's just not that popular as a leather. Even though hunters really want to kill them, a lot of them, because they're so bad for the environment and they're just horrible animals. But anyway, Gallon Leathers over in Wisconsin, he managed to develop like for us this like a very good, nice wild boar leather. And I just thought it'd be kind of cool now that leather exists. Like let's make some bags and belts and stuff out of it. I think it could be pretty cool. So we're working that out. We've got the leather. I've got a bunch of different, you know, so I've got to decide how waxy I want it to be and all this kind of stuff. Yeah. It's a lot, but yeah, that's on the docket. And also through a series of weird, I'll say serendipitous coincidences, I managed to get access to this very unusual kind of denim out of Italy that is very new and very unrefined. It's like a new kind of sustainable technology sort of thing that it's not really ready yet for big brands. Like in a couple of years, like, Gap and Banana Republic, they're going to come around, they'll pick it up and it'll be all over the place. But at the moment, it's a bit unrefined. They can't quite make it at scale yet. But there's this like gap now in like 2025, like a little dude like me can come and get a little bit of it and start selling it first. So that's next month in February, I'm running around Italy and Portugal to try and see if I can get like a little line of jeans out, which would be cool.
That's rad.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool. I like that both those are sort of products that aren't necessarily someone else is already doing it today. Like the idea of like wild boar leather. It's like never would have thought of that, but it's kind of, I guess it's almost like horse butt, right? It's like, who would have thought horse butt's a thing? And like now everyone wants to use it. So
yeah. Horse butt's crazy. I mean, for me, it's like the feral swine thing is just so good because it's like they're just the worst animals in the world. I wanted to call the leather company like worst leather or something, worst leather goods or bad leather goods, except that the leather is good. It's just the animal that's bad. So I was thinking maybe just the tagline will be the best leather from the worst animal. Because it's like when I came out with my boots, like the whole, I don't want to say marketing campaign, it was just a couple posts I did, but it was centered on like, this is the least problematic leather in the whole world. They're terrible animals. They're not even native, so we can't say we're disrupting their rightful place in the ecosphere, and they cause billions of dollars of damage every year to farms. And they're vectors for diseases, like just dozens of diseases that could kill us all. They've got like their own kind of swine flu that could kill us any second. And biodiversity decreases anywhere they are. It's sucking up resources. And native, there's all these reasons that just terrible. And I'm like, dude, like this is it. Like you can give a vegan this leather, like it's fine. Everyone hates it. Everyone hates this animal. If we could just make leather that looks any good, and we did. And I went to Gal and I'm like, please, can I have exclusivity over this leather? I really want it. So I might. I think I can, at least for a couple of colors.
Yeah, and it sounds like you already got it solved. So like that's awesome. But it got me thinking a bit about like Billy Tannery in the UK. It was like, one. Yeah, it's actually randomly an old colleague of mine. It's his cousin that runs it.
I've always kind of wanted to visit. I've got to suss up the goat leather. I think it's really cool.
Yeah, because I think it's something similar. There was like some kind of environmental issue where they're like, we've got all this extra goat hides or something. And he's like, I got a plan, and I think maybe a goat farm or something.
I would like to see more goat out there. I went to Shut NYC, a very V leather jacket brand from America, and I did some pictures of their factory, and one of them was like, let's break down the different kinds of animals for jackets, like what's the pros and cons of lamb and versus goat versus horse, blah blah blah. And yeah, the reason goat is on all the old World War jackets is mostly because we were running low on cows. And goat is like, apparently it's just as strong, maybe even stronger. Like it's totally fine. It's just like a little bit less of a consistent grain. It's a little bit less aesthetically nice, which obviously the army doesn't care about. So they just like, whatever, we're going to put that on your jackets. But it's like, it's a bit cheaper. It's a bit thinner, but it's just as tough. And it's cool. I'd like to see more goat out there. I'm actually just talking to Cockpit USA. They make a lot of repro World War jackets. And I was at their shop the other day talking to them about it, and I want like a black goat skin flat jacket. That'd be cool. But yeah, anyway, I want to. That
sounds pretty rad.
Actually, the boots that I made, when I was in my closet somewhere, I made a pair of boots by hand once. I made one boot, sorry, and then as someone else was making a better boot alongside. So I got the right, he got the left. You can very quickly tell whose is whose. But that was goat skin leather, which I kind of made that myself at Lafargue Tannery in Mexico. They invited me down with a bunch of other brands for like a workshop thing. And they're like, just to get to know your products, and we'll let all these brand reps make their own leather. And also Nick, this random blogger from New York. And I was like, goat. I want to do goat leather.
That's cool.
Goat is special. It's special in how not special it is, I'd like to see more of it.
Yeah, one of my best mates, he's up in Steamboat Springs. He's made like a whole business out of just doing bison leather products.
Yeah.
Steamboat leather is his brand, but like super interesting to see kind of like his whole business is like, I'm like all about bison.
And that's part of the swine business was like, I was talking to a friend of mine who's made a bunch of online businesses, and he's like, yeah, and then you can like sell jeans there, and then you can sell like this, like there's like a corn-based fabric I found somewhere, and he's like, you can make stuff out of that in there. And I was like, yeah, but I kind of think the whole thing should be like, that's funny and cool, and it's a hook. I don't have anything else in there. I want to this whole thing is like fueled by this mission to wipe out the scourge of feral pigs. I'm just trying to decide if I need to hire someone else to do the ads for it, because it might be a bit weird to have like this foreign invasive Australian coming in to talk about how horrible these foreign invasive pigs are, you know. But maybe that's an irony people will like.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you bias towards like the product speaks for itself, but then like just bring in a bit of the environmental benefit, like versus it being like the primary USP, I think people be receptive to it.
Yeah, I mean, when I was doing the boots, I was just like, you know, much like myself, they're a foreign species, but I'm here. I was invited here by the government, and I'm here with their blessing and contributing to the economy. Unlike these horrible animals, that's how I did it.
Just as long as you don't have to like put on a pig suit or anything, then you're good, right?
Oh, yeah, I want to separate myself from them. Although I would kind of like to do jackets maybe one day. That'd be kind of cool.
Yeah, why not? I mean, if they work well and it's, you know, good product, like why not?
Yeah.
Super cool. Well, I don't want to take up too much of your time. I'm aware we're at the hour mark. Is there anything else you kind of wanted to go into specifically, or?
Well, I got a lot going on, but yeah, I can't talk too much about the denim, my jeans project yet. That's coming up. But the idea is by mid-year that'll be up.
Cool.
And then otherwise, for Vietnam videos, depending on when this goes up, soon, if not now, we'll have 2 other Vietnam videos, and one is the one I said about the shoemaker there, and the other one is specifically about military surplus stuff, if that's an angle that people are more interested in, because we went to a couple of stores there, and one was the denim place, and all the denim guys were there, and one member of the Vietnam Raw Denim group had his own military surplus store, and so we went there, and that was, yeah, it was all like really apparel from the Vietnam War, and so we kind of got into it a little bit deeper with him as to the pros and cons and mindset and of selling U.S. military stuff in Vietnam. The only thing is Vietnam it's not as bad as China, where I've also lived, but they still don't really have freedom of speech. So there's a lot of the time he's like, I'm not answering that. He didn't want to get too much trouble. Yeah. But it was still pretty good. It was a good interview, so that'll be out. Yeah, that'll be out.
That'll be super fascinating to watch. Just like, I mean, as I mentioned, right, it's like such a strange and interesting topic that I think that'll be super cool to watch.
It'll be medium cool, because again, he had to silence himself a couple of times, but it'll be cool. It might not be super cool, but it'll be cool. You know, we'll see. I'll see when the translation comes back. I mean, I knew what he was saying then, but I can't remember. It was ages ago. But yeah, I'll have a draft of that in the next couple of weeks. Yeah,
super rad, and yeah, definitely. Yeah, if there's any kind of events going on in New York, you know, like sort of in-person hangouts and stuff, definitely like keep me posted, because I was talking to some buddies the other day that's like, man, I've been out to New York in like a decade now, and it feels like there's a good scene over there. Like I know you're out there.
Yeah, you and anyone else. There's an Instagram page called Tri-State Denim Hangs, which is a less cool version of the name it used to have, which was New York Denim Hangs, and they didn't want to alienate the Connecticut and New Jersey people. So it's Tri-State
East Coast problems.
So just like go there and join that, and there's a group chat, and it's always active. Like we meet up like every couple months or so, you know. It slowed down during COVID, but fairly often, you know, because a couple of the guys like own a bar in Manhattan. We'll just go there, hang out, have some cheeseburgers and stuff. So
that's cool.
Yeah, I would encourage anyone who's thinking of going to New York, including you, David, join that group. Try and sync up.
Yeah, cool.
It's something crazy, but it's still, you know, you meet cool people you like.
Yeah, I'm definitely hoping to get something similar going here in the Bay Area, because it's like we've got Standard and Strange here, like Selvedge is down the street, so it feels like
I guarantee you can, man. Just make an Instagram account for the hangouts, and then just like run around all the tagged people, ask the local stores who's like customers there. You know, it'll definitely be easy to get like 5 guys together pretty quickly.
Yeah, London one took a long time to build, but I think it was pretty cool how it turned out. So I'm pretty confident we'll get something going again.
Yeah, me too.
Cool. Well, awesome, Nick. Super cool that you had the time to chat today, and like, you know, super cool that you were able to show us your story about Vietnam and your travels, and glad we finally got a chance to get you on the podcast and get to connect and chat. So thank you very much. I look forward to getting this posted and sharing it out with our viewers, and hopefully your viewers are interested as well, because I know, Sons of Selvedge is teeny tiny compared to Stridewise. So
yeah, I'll do whatever I can. I'm very grateful to be on the podcast. I feel very cool, and like the smaller the podcast, the better. That's like the real aficionados. You know what I mean? Like the people who are actually cool and knowledgeable, and not just like hoes for media stuff. The guys that are very discerning. Like when I make it onto Sons of Selvedge, then I feel pretty cool.
Oh
so,
man,
thank you for the experience.
that's the best compliment we've received so far. So thank you so much for that.
Cool.
Awesome. Well, I'll wrap it up here. So thanks, Denimheads, for tuning in again today. Thank you, Nick from Stridewise, for being our guest. Please like, follow, subscribe to Stridewise and to Sons of Selvedge Podcast, anywhere you consume our content, Instagram, YouTube, you name it. We both would appreciate it. And thank you, Nick.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks. This was fun.